Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. Are you ready to delve into the dynamic world of agile methodologies and explore how they're evolving in today's tech and business landscape? Well, today I've got a huge privilege because I'm going to be speaking with Dave West, CEO of Scrum.org, a pivotal figure in the world of Scrum and agile practices. And Dave's journey from shaping the rational unified process at IBM to steering Scrum.org's vision has been nothing short of remarkable. And I want to discuss today the evolution of agile methodologies, the challenges and strategies of scaling agile, and also the impact of emerging technologies on agile teams. But before we get Dave on the podcast today, I just want to take a moment to thank my sponsors. Yes, that's Kiteworks. They're currently sponsoring Tech Talks Daily and have been a huge support because legacy managed file transfer tools are dated. They lack the security that today's remote workforce demands. And companies that continue relying on outdated technology, as we say every day on this podcast, they can put their sensitive data at risk, unwittingly maybe. But for me, I think it's the level of security on Kiteworks MFT is something that I've not seen in other solutions, and I have interviewed nearly 3,000 people on here, especially because so many require multiple unhardened servers. So if that is something that you want to explore, please step into the future of secure managed file transfers with Kiteworks. You can do that by simply visiting kiteworks.com to get started. That's kiteworks.com, and you can get started today. But now it's time to get the product owner and CEO at Scrum.org onto the podcast. So buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you are in the world right now, I'm going to be beaming your ears all the way to Boston, Massachusetts, where Dave West is waiting to speak with us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, Neil. Hi, everybody. My name's Dave West. I'm the CEO at Scrum.org. Scrum.org is a training certification body around Scrum, professional Scrum, founded by the co-creator of Scrum, Ken Schwaber, the chairman of the board, and I guess my boss.
Oh, there's so much I want to talk with you about today, because you're also one that's been at the forefront of software development methodologies with your work on the rational unified process at IBM now with Scrum.org. But how do you see the evolution of agile methodologies in the context of today's rapidly changing tech landscape? Everyone's going crazy about AI at the moment, but what do you make of it all? Where do you think we're heading next?
So it's interesting. Yes, you did. I was the product manager of the Rational Unified process. In fact, that was actually where I met Ken Schwaber, and he told me I was an idiot, which turns out he wasn't totally wrong. So it's interesting. I have been involved in this world for, 30 years now. And it's interesting to see its evolution. Obviously, the Rational Unified process was literally a process that told you what to do. It was a methodology that you did extend with a development case. You added pieces to it, but it gave you all the artifacts, all the assets that you needed to develop, whether it's an architecture document, whether it's a use case specification, etc. Now, over time, we've sort of moved away from that to approaches, frameworks that are more illustrative of a series of principles, ideas like Scrum. And Scrum, it's all about empiricism. It's all about empowered teams. It's all about continuous improvement of both the product and the way that you're working in the context of a product goal. This sort of rolling process. And there are still some things that are consistent with Rational Unified process, iterations, this idea of incrementally building things, very true, etc. But ultimately, it's up to the teams to decide how they work. As we've progressed, and we'll talk about AI in a minute, Neil, but as we've progressed, what I'm seeing is that mechanism for delivering value, the idea of sprints, iterations, whatever you call them, is a hold fast. I think that is going to continue forever. The idea of a goal, a clearly articulated outcome, definitely. And there's a lot more work being done on that with design thinking and on all those D-school kind of stuff. Add to that, though, this empowered teams. How do you empower a team? Coaching, creating an environment for them to succeed is definitely part of that. So in terms of the evolution, I don't see a new framework on the horizon. But what I do see is extensions to the frameworks and to the idea sets, really, around design thinking, around lean startup, around good coaching practices, around modern management practices, clear alignment with OKRs to outcomes. Those things are definitely influencing how teams work. And then, of course, there's AI, which AI ultimately is hopefully on the journey to remove tedious, boring, repetitive, awful work from knowledge workers' lives, whether it be a lawyer doing document review, which sounds like the worst thing in the world to do, but apparently that's what lawyers do a lot, or whether it's a software engineer writing tests, because as an ex-software engineer, we don't like writing tests, do we? So hopefully it's taken out the mundane, which will free up time to be more creative. And that creative time ultimately will be hopefully in pursuit of customer needs, product goals, outcomes, etc. Then how you solve those problems, those customer needs, those things, I'm hoping that AI will evolve into or LLMs in particular will evolve into a supporter, a co-pilot, a coach, an enabler that says, hey, maybe you want to try this. Hey, let's work on that sprint goal. I think that's going to be the future in terms of how it really influences process. It's going to basically provide that extra helping hand and say, hey, if you use this, maybe this is a really good canvas that can really help you understand that problem. Or, hey, I looked at your backlog and I noticed that most of them are written as tasks, not as outcomes. Have you thought about looking at this? And here's some training maybe that could help you do that. I'm hoping it's going to be like that. We'll see.
And I also wanted to highlight, if we look back throughout your career, you played a pivotal role in transforming Tasktop from a services business into a VC-backed product business. But I'm curious, what were the key challenges you faced during that transition, and how did you approach to product management and team leadership evolve to meet these challenges? 'Cause I feel there's quite a story there as well.
So it is interesting you pull on that thread. There's a lot of organizations that are ultimately customer-driven, services-oriented companies. ThoughtWorks is a great example that have amazing products. They had Mingle and some awesome products, right? But unfortunately, they could never really capitalize on those products and scale those products because the discipline of product is very different to the discipline of services. And I think what we did at Tasktop, with a little help from some VC money, and Mick Curson, obviously the founder, is an amazing rock star. We made it. We had a vision, we had a goal, and we introduced product management relatively early when we were still 7, 8, 10 people. And then because of that, though we were still doing services, we had to pay the bills. Those services were in line with a clear roadmap, which allowed us to incrementally move towards being a product company. And then when we got the 12 million from Yaletown and Austin Ventures, that first round, we then used that to grow that product management capability, build out those engineering teams. But we were already on the way to delivering product consistently and following some sort of vision. It wasn't easy, though, because obviously sometimes paying the bills can really bang on the door very loudly, whether it's a client or a potential client that says, hey, yeah, we like your product, but could you do this? And we're like, well, and we're going to pay you this. Ooh, that's a big piece of chocolate. I really quite like that. So it wasn't easy, but I think you have to make your focus you have to have your intent and your focus clearly transparent and clearly understood, and then you can make progress towards it. And we're very fortunate that we had a fantastic team, Mick Curson being one of them, the author of Project to Product, the creator of Mylen, probably one of the smartest guys I've ever worked with. And he really kept us on that vision. I'm not sure he slept, but he kept us on that vision.
So in your book, The Nexus Framework for Scaling Scrum, you also address the complexities of scaling Scrum in larger organizations. So can you share some of the insights on the most common pitfalls organizations face, or what you've seen them face, especially when scaling Agile practices? And is there anything that they should be doing to avoid falling into those traps and effectively overcome them?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Nexus isn't really an enterprise scrum or enterprise sort of framework. What it is, it tells you gives you some ideas how to work together when you've got multiple teams pursuing the same product goal or the same outcomes. And it talks about how you manage dependencies. It talks about the sort of additional practices you need to put in place to ensure that you've got a potential shippable increment every sprint, or at least you're working together in an effective way and pain is lessened. Or, yeah, I wouldn't say removed, because 5 people in a room and you can always have challenges. So what I see, though, when I look at organizations that are trying to scale agile practices, ultimately is at a certain point, you have to make choices, design choices, organizational choices about how you align your teams, what products you're focused on, what you incentivize, how you incentivize. And when I say incentivize, I mean promote people, reward people, bonus people. What are the job families? What are those? And those things are hard to change. We've had, 70, 80 years of the previous industrial age, the age of oil and mass production, which has changed the world. We're very fortunate because of it. It's amazing what we have done. But those practices, that the idea of specialization of labor, the idea of breaking down things into small chunks, the idea of a very few number of people making decisions, the ideas of promotion being about what you do rather than what your team does, those sort of ideas, this industrial mindset undermines most agile implementations. And at the end of the day, you have to align the organization holistically, or I guess if I was a systems thinker, I would say the system needs to be completely aligned. You have to optimize at that system level rather than at the team level. And that's really blooming hard. And I see pockets of it in organizations, but only if they really need it. And that tends to be driven by a real business driver, competition, business is on fire, that kind of situation. A new product that is fundamentally different from their existing products, and they're having to do that. I see it with inspirational leaders that come in and say, hey, we need to break that, get rid of the hierarchies, focus on outcomes, let's deliver more stuff. Don't worry about all that bureaucracy, make smart choices. I'll be honest, Neil, I haven't seen agility, even in the classic companies like Tesla, Amazon, or I see pockets.
Yeah.
But I don't see it across the whole. And that's because these organizations themselves fit in an ecosystem of skills and people and society. And you go home from work and your mother-in-law asks you, oh, so what did you do today? And what's your job? And if you say, well, I'm an individual contributor on a team delivering value, she's like, oh, well, I'm not sure I like my view. It's things like that ultimately get in the way. And I think that's going to just take time. I think the digital age is ultimately taking time. I do think as we free up people to concentrate on more creative work with things like LLMs and the chat GPTs of the world, I do believe that is going to change, because the very nature of creative work is a team endeavor, it's people working together. It's like creating films, not bridges. And it's a very different, and I think that will change the world. And then these practices will become natural, but it's challenging. And you have to think holistically, and you have to think about it's human beings that have to change how they approach work and how they approach each other, which is a hard thing to change.
100% with you there. And of course, one of the reoccurring critiques of Scrum is this perception that sometimes it's too rigid and adapting to unforeseen development challenges that always seem to happen, such as needing unexpected additional time for feature implementation due to code refactoring or something. So how does Scrum.org address these criticisms, and what mechanisms have you put in place within Scrum to accommodate the dynamic nature of software development? Because it's a world you've come from, and I know it's so important, but without compromising the integrity and the efficiency of the process. Tricky balance, right?
It is a tricky balance. And the biggest trick from Scrum.org's perspective is when you teach something, it's very important to use the right words, to be a little bit dogmatic, to teach the idea. You use, hey, follow that routine. And then how do you then become pragmatic in pursuit of it? Ultimately, I think at the heart of Scrum is a very simple approach, which has been corrupted sometimes. I wrote an article when I was an analyst called Water Scrum Fall that described this sort of corruption of Scrum. Yeah, we're doing Scrum, but we're told the work we have to do. We're doing Scrum, but we don't release frequently because there's a huge machine to do that. But we're doing Scrum. Water Scrum Fall. The reality is that if you move into that model, then the way in which most Scrum teams are managed is through velocity, or through output, or through work, really. And if you're being managed to work, then yes, Scrum's an incredibly effective way of doing that. And guess what? It isn't going to like it when you don't deliver on what you committed to in the sprint plan, because you committed to doing all this work. You didn't do this work because of unforeseen circumstances, etc. Now, if you concentrate on outcomes, you focus on sprint goals, which is what we try to teach. If you pay attention to the fact that this is complex work, and that means by its very nature, you can't know what it's going to be until you've done it, then I think that Scrum is an incredibly powerful framework for identifying those things. And a great example now, so I was recently with a large consumer packaged goods company that have had some, actually it's on the website, we can talk about it. So Gillette used Scrum to deliver their exfoliating new male razor, best a man can get. The Super Bowl ad, actually, very exciting. Scrum razor, I wanted to call it. They weren't so into that. Anyway, but so they used Scrum effectively over and over again. And then in this particular division of R&D where they were building product, and then a new initiative came along and they started using Scrum on that. And they had a sprint review, and the sprint review was a train wreck. And I think that they wouldn't mind me saying this. It wasn't, but afterwards we were talking about it, and actually that was really good. And the reason why it was a train wreck was they identified they highlighted the assumptions. They showed the fact that the plan was the broad sort of idea that was going to get out in fall 2020, whatever it was, 3 or whatever, was unrealistic. Now, for many, that would be a disaster. Oh my God, we've had a meeting with senior leaders that have highlighted the fact that we've not, oh my God, it's all going to go horribly wrong, right? It's a train wreck. But actually, because of the mindset at Gillette and at P&G in this particular part of the company, they were like, hey, that's great. Now we know, what can we do? How do we pivot? What should we change the feature set? Is the goal right? How do we measure the goal? Let's reevaluate that. So they're the kind of things that we teach at scrum.org, and our professional Scrum trainers spend a lot of time emphasizing. Yes, you could think when we say, somebody goes, I'm doing a daily stand-up, and I say, well, actually, it's a daily Scrum. We are a little bit dogmatic on words like that. And the reason why isn't because we care the words, but we care that it reminds you. The reason why it is, well, one, some people can't stand, which isn't kind of cool. But the other reason is because a Scrum forms in rugby. You should know this, being from England and the UK. When the ball stops moving. When I was playing rugby, it's usually because I'd fainted or something. Somebody here. I went to school with a guy called Martin Johnson, who ended up captaining England. So playing rugby with him was just like embarrassing, really, would be a good way. He was so good. Anyway, so the ball stopped making progress. The game stopped. A Scrum formed. Whoever had the ball before puts it in. So a daily Scrum ultimately is daily. We meet as a Scrum. The ball is value that we're trying to deliver, the goal that we're trying to achieve. Let's get moving again. Let's get the game going again. And that's the reason why we remind people with the words daily. That's what a Scrum means. It's not that I'm dogmatic about the fact you can't say stand up. You can say whatever you want. I'm just using this as an opportunity to remind us why we're here. Why we do it daily, because we think that the game needs a refresh every once in a while. The ball happens, and then sometimes daily Scrums are literally like, oh, the ball's moving fine, let's get on with it. And sometimes it's like, I've lost the ball. Where's the ball? Who's got the ball? What the heck's happened to the ball? Which happened when I was playing rugby in school. I tell you, usually because Glenn Ribbons had stolen it or something. But God, I hope he's not listening. That would be embarrassing. But anyway, so yes, that's the reason why we focus on outcomes. That's why we focus on the emphasis of what Scrum is, the essence of what Scrum is, rather than the dogma.
And I'm glad you mentioned that potential corruption within Scrum sometimes, and why that flexibility is so important. Because if we look on the flip side of what we were just talking about, in some instances, I'll be diplomatic here, teams have expressed concern on occasion about certain Scrum Masters potentially overstepping their roles, leading to a more rigid application of Scrum rules that can stifle innovation, stifle flexibility when you need it the most. So is there anything you can share around how at Scrum.org you ensure that Scrum Masters strike that right balance that we're talking about between guiding the team and allowing for the necessary flexibility that software development requires, and also how organisations can prevent the misapplication of Scrum principles that might lead to some of that corruption and challenges that we're highlighting here?
No, that's a lot of questions, but
sorry, I did fire about 5 at you there.
Yeah, I know. I was like, my God, it's like one of our PSM1 exams. Oh, yeah, but with a slightly different accent. So at the heart of it is how are organizations measuring what the value that the Scrum Master is bringing? So we made changes in the Scrum Guide in 2020, which seems ages ago now, right? Where we really emphasize that the whole Scrum team is responsible for delivering value. They're in pursuit of this product goal. Historically, it was really this concept of a development team was concentrating on value, and the product owner was concentrating on ensuring that the most value is being delivered, and then the Scrum Master was serving some sort of servant leadership way. Oh, everybody, the organization, the product owner, and the team, et cetera, and intentionally, that was a different age. Maybe we introduced that. We were sort of highlighting the fact that you need somebody that's not necessarily always in the thick of the action of writing code, delivering value, all that stuff, to step back and have that perspective. However, it kind of got corrupted in a way that we didn't foresee, where Scrum Masters sort of took it that because they were responsible for Scrum, that's what they would do, and that's how you measure me. No, an effective Scrum Master is by their very nature responsible for helping the team deliver more value. It's as simple as that, really. And they do it differently from the product owner and the developers. That doesn't mean that they can't do it as well, but when they're in this accountability, when they're doing these things, what they're trying to do is they're trying to put light on the outcomes, put light on the work, put light on the definition of done. They're trying to help facilitate, mentor, coach. They're trying to, but ultimately their success is the success of the team. So at the end of the day, let's talk about how you're measuring your Scrum Masters, and let's ensure that your Scrum Masters are being measured in the same way as the team is being measured, because then what you find, hopefully, if you tell them as well, it's not just how you measure them, you have to mention it to them as well. Hopefully their behavior will change, because then ultimately 1 minute, and then they will make the decisions based on that outcome that they're seeking. So maybe they're doing some Scrum stuff. If they're like, well, hang on, maybe it's better that I'm helping doing some testing, I'm doing whatever, it's whatever the team needs. And I honestly believe, but I'm a little bit biased, that if you're having somebody step back a little bit and say, hey, why are we doing this? Hey, it is a useful thing, but it's not always the right thing at the right time. So measurement is the key way, from my experience, that you can drive that really integrated team. And then Scrum Masters become a natural, the application of the accountabilities become very natural to the outcomes that the team's seeking.
And of course, you are someone that spends a lot of time on the road. You're frequently delivering keynotes at major industry conferences. And I'm curious, as someone that spent a lot of time on the show floors and talking with different leaders, etc., what emerging trends or technologies excite you the most? And how do you foresee them impacting the way teams might better collaborate and deliver software in the future? Is there anything that you've seen that particularly set off that light bulb moment in yourself over the last few years?
Yeah, I think 2020, we all took a moment to really look at how teams work in a distributed way. Prior to that, many teams were very distributed, but it was bit of a mess, really. You outsourced some developers were in India, some developers were in Solihull, some developers were wherever they were. And it was all a bit of a mess. And the Agile community was like, you've got to be together in one place, and distributed doesn't work. And we've proven that was totally wrong. And so what I am most excited about is I'm most excited about how we work together in a distributed way, delivering amazing stuff to our customers. I think that's a really interesting. So the use of Mural, the use of Slack, the use of tools like Zoom, and how they've kind of improved. I mean, they have massively improved, and we're continuously improving those kinds of tools. The other thing that's really interesting is data. When I was building software, getting data was literally an act of God. I mean, you would have to, it was, obviously it was a few years ago, I was working for a commercial union, you may know them, and back in the day, now they're something else, Ariva or something, I think, I don't know. Anyway, and getting access to data was almost impossible. The improvements around not only the access to data, but the tools that we can apply to data on the team, the fact that you don't have to have specialist functions. Yeah, they can help, but you really can bring that into the team. And whether those new data analytics tools that are designed for people that haven't got master's degrees in data analytics, SPS was a great example when I was a kid, when I was younger. My God, it's so hard to use. I'm sure it's much easier now, but when I was like, wow, it was so hard. Now we're seeing tools, data and analytics tools that are really helping to bring things a lot more, because as a development team using Scrum, the best sprint reviews are sprint reviews on stuff that's in production, that's generating data that helps us make decisions about what we're going to do next. Best sprint reviews. And you get those stakeholders and you say, hey, this is what people are actually using. This is the clicks. This is interesting. They get stuck between this and this. They don't often, we did a quick survey of them. We got this data here. Having the ability to rapidly assemble information, present it in a sprint review based on real customers, and having all teams able to do that, privacy concerns, you have to deal with all of that. But ultimately having that, I think, is just amazing, because then you're empowering these teams not only to learn more about their customer and their user, but also to become smarter around making decisions about how we do the work. Neil, most software, 70 to 80% of the features that we create are rarely or never used still. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And some of that is because they're exception cases and we don't want them to be used, but they're important to make sure that things don't go horribly wrong. Planes crash, websites go down, etc. And so I get that. But there's a significant percentage still that we could do better. And we can do better if we have insights around that. So I think that those products are really interesting as well. So how we collaborate more effectively and getting access to better data in a way that idiots like me can use, then I think that's what I'm excited about.
If we were to look back at your career again and maybe reflect on your time as VP Research Director at Forrester Research, how have you seen research and analysis in software development and delivery? Have you seen them evolve? What role do you see data-driven decision increasingly making in today's software development processes? Is there anything that you've seen here and learned from the past and what's evolved and how things are changing there?
So as an analyst, data was a bit of a commodity that we would use. Now, what's interesting is now everybody kind of can ask data. I just did a quick survey around the use of product as an idea, as a concept inside IT organizations. And do you have a product model? Do you know what your product is? Do you work in a project or a product? We asked some questions like that. I got 4.5, almost 5,000 responses in 2 days. Which is incredible, right? And the fact is, historically, organizations like Forrester and Gartner were the hoarders of data. And now that isn't the case. Now the fact is you get You can just Google it. You can ask ChatGPT, you can ask Bard, you can ask all these tools, and you get amazing stuff that you can use. I think that is incredibly powerful. Unfortunately, though, it comes at a cost. The data you're getting is biased. The data you're getting is you don't have all the details of it. The good thing about an analyst firm is there is some level of rigor as to the way in which things are done. There's smart people that have ethical understanding of the difference between collation and all these mathematical terms that I barely understand from my comprehensive education. And I do worry a bit about that. It's easy as a writer, and I write, you write, it's easy to find data that proves a point. That doesn't mean that point's correct. And I think that we have to become more intelligent about the usage. We're all getting a lot smarter using the tools. We're all getting much smarter, but we have to also understand bias. We have to also understand ethics. We have to also understand context. Those assumptions that we make when we see something about data can be very divisive. And I worry sometimes that without that kind of intelligent parenting that companies like Gartner, Forrester, the media used to do, now they don't do that, unfortunately. I worry that sometimes we're going to make decisions that aren't necessarily great. You can imagine, I'm a software engineer at Facebook, right? I'm adding a feature. All the data's telling me this is the right feature. We don't realize that actually it's marginalizing certain groups of people because of the way it's being used. We don't think about the fact that it is actually enabling a group of people to bully another group of people. We don't think about the consequences of how it's being used in political, because we're just like, wow, this feature, everybody wants it. Let's do it. And suddenly you're in a situation that is that. Obviously, we had Volkswagen and the emissions scandal, Volkswagen with the diesel engines. As a software engineer now, I've got to the power that I'm working in a team, the power that I can deliver and the impact I can make is kind of scary. And I think data can be an excuse to not think anymore. And we have to be moral human beings that are thinking all the time. And data should just help us make better decisions, right?
Yeah, such an important point to make, especially when it feels like critical thinking is almost at an all-time low. And there's a lot of talk around AI and our reliance on it. If it does lessen that critical thinking, and maybe that muscle gets weaker. But if we look to the future here, if we try to get all the ideas, experience and insights out of your head, everything that you've learned in your career, what advice would you offer to an aspiring tech leader who aims to drive innovation and change within their organization? Any piece of advice you'd pass down?
If I was talking to me as a younger me, I would obviously tell me that Leicester City won the Premier League in 2015 and I should put £500 on them. And then 15,000 to 1, right? So that would have been nice, wasn't it? But ignoring that for a minute, Neil, though it's always good to bring it up just to remind everybody. But I would, there's probably three things that I think stand out. One is the importance of building and nurturing a network of people is so valuable. The reason why I'm in the position that I'm in, the reason why I did my stuff with Tasktop and the startup, the reason why I built I ended up being a research director at Forrester and all these things was because of the people that I know. That conversation with Ken 20-something years ago where he called me an idiot ultimately we built a relationship, surprisingly, considering the first moment, but we built a relationship and a friendship, and I learned so much from him, from all these people that I've had the opportunity to do. So even though it's a Wednesday night and the last thing you want to do is go out for a beer with somebody, you're knackered, you've had a hard day, your tests don't bloody work, whatever the situation is, investing that time is super important. And things like social media and that do not replace that. So number one is network. I think that's super important. Number two is learning, reading, making time, putting time in your schedule to read that new article on I don't know, ethical AI, read that a new approach to understanding the customer from Stanford. Put time in your schedule to do that. A friend of mine, actually, he's our Scrum Master, actually. He has a little script that loads a backlog across, so it searches like New York Times, and builds this script of things that would be interesting. And he has in his schedule every day an hour of learning. And that doesn't mean that it can't change. It doesn't mean that it doesn't sometimes do other things, but it's that reminder. So learning. And the third thing is be kind. And I know that my gran, I was brought up with my grandparents, and my gran was a rock star, Lillian Carter, school secretary, 30 years being a school secretary. And she used to say to me when I came home from school, not what have you done, but who have you helped? Yeah. And I think that giving to others ultimately not only helps the network, and it really does, but you learn so much. Every time I talk to an aspiring entrepreneur or product owner or even CEO, though I'm a rubbish CEO, so it's probably not a good person to talk to. Every time I talk to these people, when somebody comes to me with a question, every time I make time, and sometimes I don't want to make time. Sometimes I'm tired, I'm grumpy, and I've got 2 kids that are destroying every part of my life on an incremental fashion. But my health, my money, my everything. But making time, being kind, approaching people, even when they're absolute annoying people, but instead of going, "You're an idiot," like Ken did, say, "Oh, that's interesting. That's not my perspective. Why do you say that?" Following the platinum rule, do unto others not as you want to be done unto, but do unto others as they want to be done unto. I think is super important. I know it doesn't sound like it's about tech or but kindness, it's something that we've pushed very hard in our community of professional Scrum trainers who can be a little bit confident, can be a little bit, dare I say, arrogant, because they are super smart and they've seen hundreds, thousands of companies. And so when somebody says, "Oh, we're doing this," they want to say, "You're an idiot." If we've tried not to do that, because it doesn't do any good. It certainly doesn't start a dialogue that's going to progress. What it does is it creates one of these barriers, one of these walls. And we know that the world is full of that at the moment. And we don't want to perpetuate that, particularly when we're building amazing software that is changing the world. Well, let's pull these walls down. Let's be kind to each other. Let's be inclusive. Let's ask questions rather than shout at people. And then I think all goodness can happen. Now, I don't think I'd have listened to me saying all of this if I'd have gone back in time, other than the Leicester thing, which I wouldn't have believed. But I think though they're the 3 things. Yeah, kindness, learning, and network.
And I think that is a beautiful and powerful moment to end on today. But before I do let you go, thank you for sharing your insights. But I want you to leave one final gift to everyone listening. And I always ask my guests to leave everyone with either a song that means something to them, or maybe it's a guilty pleasure that we can add to our Spotify playlist, or a book that you'd recommend that we can add to our Amazon wish list. I don't mind which. All I'll ask is, what would you like to leave everyone listening with, and why?
So, can I do both? I've just read Misbelieve, which is the why do sane, intelligent, amazing people have stupid ideas, which I'm guilty of, by the way, particularly my soccer team. So it's a really interesting book, and I'll send you the link, so you can put it on the transcript stuff. Really interesting book. In terms of songs, so I love a singer called Lloyd Cole. I don't know if you remember him. He was in the Commotions.
Lost Weekend.
Well, actually, and I love A Lost Weekend in Amsterdam. The lyrics, I was 2 flights down, 2 flights up, but I still felt I was underground. Jane was in a turtleneck. I was much happier then. I love Lloyd Cole, and actually he lives not too far from me here in America. He moved to some sort of artist community in the west of Massachusetts, and he lives there. But I've only ever seen him in concert twice, and that Lost Weekend in Amsterdam is awesome. Perfect Skins, Ray, love that. Great song, but those late 80s, early 90s classics, just the wording, the thought behind it. It was a generation of Pulp. It was a generation of Blur, even Oasis to some extent. And they had the lyrics, the intelligence, Morrissey, obviously with the Smiths, and the intelligence of the lyrics and the way, I just love that. So Lloyd Cole, Last Weekend in Amsterdam, get it on your playlist and your mind will be open to a very different world of singer-songwriters of the late 80s.
What a great choice. Absolute classic. I'll get that added straight to the Spotify playlist, and we'll get the book added to the Amazon wish list too. I think there'll be a lot of people checking that out. And of course, scrum.org is the website. But is there anywhere else you'd like to point everyone listening if they want to find out more information about you, your work, or anything in between?
Scrum.org, and don't be shy, LinkedIn. It's always good to connect on LinkedIn with a nice little personal note. If I'm not connected via somebody else, I don't totally trust it. So put a personal note, say, hey, I listened to Neil's podcast. I totally love Lloyd Cole as well. And let's get connected. But scrum.org is always a great place to see what I'm up to.
Awesome. Well, we've covered so much in a short amount of time now. And I really do hope people do reach out and contact you there, because you're a great guy. And you brought up the Leicester thing as a Derby County fan. That does hurt. But more than anything, just thank you for sharing your insights, your experience. Pure gold for me. But thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Neil. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Take care.
So, as we conclude this enlightening conversation with Dave West today, I think we've journeyed through the evolving landscape of Agile methodologies, from the early days to its current state, where flexibility, continuous improvement, and team empowerment have never been more critical. And we've touched upon the challenges of scaling Agile practices, and also the exciting role of emerging technologies and what they play in this evolution. But Dave's insights also remind us the importance of focusing on outcomes, continuous learning, and the power of kindness in leadership. And I always say on this podcast every day, technology works best when it brings people together. And I love how Dave brought kindness into this. And hey, I think we all know we need more of that in the world right now. But what are your key takeaways? How do you see Agile methodologies shaping the future of your projects and your teams? Share your experiences with me by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @Neil C. Hughes. And before I let you go, I'm going to sign off with a question for you all to ponder. In an Agile world, how can we balance the need for speed and flexibility with the need for stability and structure? Something for you to think about. So stay agile, my friends, and I will be back bright and early tomorrow.